Providence Television International, the game changer, taking you to the outer limits of television. Compassion is a tangible expression of love for those who are suffering or in need. It's a feeling that arises when leaders, particularly political leaders, feel motivated to relieve that suffering. But in a broader sense, compassion has often been defined as the very foundation of morality and ethics. Eric Hoffer, the legendary American thinker, even pushed it further. He says, compassion is the antitoxin of the soul. Where there is compassion, even the most poisonous impulses remain relatively harmless. Hoffer's assertion is simply unassailable. Compassion truly enlivens us because it is the ultimate test of spirituality. Our souls are nourished by acts of compassion because it is the response to the suffering of others. It motivates an unquenchable desire to help. And it has been said that many political leaders have a huge appetite for savagery and sadism. They enjoy being cruel to people whose well-being they are supposed to protect and nurture. Daniel Goleman posited a long time ago that true compassion means not only feeling another's pain, but also being moved to help relieve it. This declaration is possibly more applicable to leaders who, by virtue of their mandate, do not need to be prompted to mitigate pain and misery. It's simply their lot to do it. Any leader, in whatever capacity, is required to see compassion as a behavioral tendency that signifies pity, inclining him to help or be merciful, encouraging empathy and altruism. Now, all moral obligations take root in compassion. Incidentally, the pains that people go through as a result of leaders' intransigence cannot be hidden. Like open wounds, they can easily fester if not given the right antidote. Great and effective leaders are often made as a result of their attachment to the values of compassion. The spirit to do good works, as underscored by this mental state, is a transformational phenomenon. Therefore, leaders who see it as an inherent duty are indeed special breeds who are not driven by ego or personal ambition. They are led by their hearts, and they make time available to ensure that people are not afflicted by suffering. They lead with feelings and very strong emotions. This makes them very approachable and inspiring. Compassion in leadership is essential because there is global vulnerability. People around the world are vulnerable to different circumstances, ranging from negative government policies, natural disasters, outbreaks of killer diseases, and war, just to mention a few. In all of these situations, people lose their livelihood and then become terribly disadvantaged. In some extreme cases, they may even become refugees in their own country. When there are such distortions, it is the duty of well-meaning leaders to rise up to the occasion and show goodwill without any thought of material benefit. The South African iconic cleric and activist, Bishop Desmond Tutu, was very emphatic in his declaration. And he said, God's dream is that you and I, and all of us, will realize that we are all one family, that we are made for togetherness, for goodness, and for compassion. We want to believe that a lot of leaders today have it within their means to nourish the ideals of compassion. In the Bible, we readily remember the story of Jesus and the blind Bartimaeus. The beggar made very frantic efforts to get the attention of Christ. The Redeemer was quick to respond to his entreaties because he himself had said, "Come to me, all you who labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." The kindness that comes from the hearts of our leaders is all we need in our moments of pain and depression. But let it be known that the blind Bartimaeus is very much with us today. He is reflected in many situations. We see him now and again in the destitute, the hungry, and the man who has no tomorrow. There are many people like him who look up to leaders for affection and succor. In responding to their plight, leaders need to act like Jesus to empathize with the neglected in relation to their urgent needs. In a spiritual sense, our service to the needy is service to God. Leaders have a responsibility to touch them in a way that genuinely promotes their self-worth. These days, when the impoverished cry out to leaders for help and hope, the leaders usually look the other way, forgetting that the mercy they show in compassion is the measure of the mercy they receive. Oftentimes, God deliberately puts afflicted people on the path of the privileged just to test them on how much they ought to show concern. They have to share in their distress and their sorrows. As a leader, you may ignore the needy because you believe it is their lot to be so. You may even think that God is not interested in the way you relate with the downtrodden. You are wrong. God notices every little service rendered in favor of the abandoned. The admonition from the Lord of creation is that we should be compassionate to them in all circumstances, as to do otherwise would be a serious infraction that comes with a penalty. Therefore, compassion is the key that connects great leaders with the people they lead. This connectivity often derives from a significant spiritual undertone, as earlier espoused. But more importantly, a leader who does not recognize the input of the altruistic ideals of compassion may completely isolate himself from the social environment in which he functions, even though occasionally he might go into some polemics that do not quite add up. From time to time, our leaders need to take a trip to the deepest points of their conscience. In doing so, three issues arise. How many people have they raised up from the darkest depth of humanity? How many disadvantaged people have they ever given a lifeline? And for how many souls have they opened the door that leads to a better life? It's incumbent on any effective leader to see a spark of God in each of the people under his care. For their sake, he should always declare his readiness to sacrifice his time, energy, and resources. That way, he becomes an embodiment of grace and loving kindness. Most people under leaders' influence or authority will always go through some kind of tribulations. They must respond to their worries and fears in spite of what might be a lowly state of their self-esteem. There's no question that everywhere around the globe, people have a right to wish for the good life, and where the basic necessities are not provided, the challenges can be very daunting for leadership. People who wallow in misery have a right to expect that their leaders can change their season and create a new format of assurance. The truth is that when acts of kindness and compassion consistently prevail, the position of beneficiaries in relation to their leader must alter. The cleavages of hate will disappear, and then they begin to see their leader as a hero rather than a villain. All leaders, particularly those endowed with the resources of state, should always strive to be benevolent. They should hold nothing back to ensure that the existence of the suffering masses does not hang precariously in the balance. Albert Schweitzer, the French philosopher and doctor, is remembered for saying that the purpose of human life is to serve and to show compassion and the will to help others. Finally, the days are gone when leaders were perceived to be productive and successful only on the basis of strong will and decisiveness. Today, the procedure has changed. The most celebrated leaders are those who are proactive, diligent, resourceful, yet meek, honorable, and kind. And that's our editorial for this week on Providence Television International. This is Emmanuel Egariwa in Benin.